They wanted me to tell something about the town of Ferron and the many stories that have come out of there. Maybe something about this town would be a good introduction. It was settled by, first, the people who came over from Sanpete County, and these were mainly Scandinavian Mormon converts. And then later other nationalities also came to Ferron. There were the German, the Swiss, the Swedish, Norwegian, and all of these people, of course, spoke with a dialect, and sometimes it became very humorous to see and to hear how they spoke the English language. And of course there were enough people there to enjoy these queer stories, and so they have been handed down just by word of mouth through the years. It would have been much more interesting to have had these stories 50 years ago, because the few that have come down to us now are likely distorted, and we have added our own little ideas to them. But just the same, I'll try and give a few as they came to us. The people of Sanpete County had adopted could you say, a habit of nicknaming people, perhaps by their physical characteristics or some other thing. But at any rate, in Ferron we also had these names, and it's likely the people were not even known by any other name than such as Red Pete and Black Pete, Long Chris and Skinny Chris, Long Fred, Saloon Fred, and so on. The story says of Red Pete, he didn't want to exert himself too much, and he always maintained that a woman was made for the comfort of man, and so she should cater to the man and see that he had the things that he enjoyed, and kept him supplied with the food and his clothes in order and things of that nature. His house became sort of dilapidated. The roof leaked badly, and he knew that it should be fixed, but he said, well, when it's raining I can't fix it, and when it's not raining it don't need fixing. And so the roof stayed in that condition. Now Black Pete was an entirely different person. He was a very energetic little fellow, quite small, but he had some other little failings, such as he was one of the good customers at the town saloon, and he quite often got to the stage where he was hardly accountable for the way he acted, but he had a lot of good pals and cronies who stayed with him just the same. And he also had a fairly prosperous farm and a good family, but they couldn't see much sense in having a lot of learning, because you didn't need to read and write, and you could figure in your head the things you needed. So school was pretty much neglected, and the older boys said didn't even learn to read and write, but they became acceptable citizens of the community and have good families from them. But in this family there were two of the boys had married girls whose names were Ethel, and the only girl of this family was named Ethel. So they called them Arth's Ethel and Cliff's Ethel and our Ethel. And Pete also loved to gather up the material that was supposed to go to the peddler. Now the peddler was just a citizen of the town who once a week or so would gather up the produce from the farmers around there, such as eggs and butter and butchered meat, and in the fall or in summer there would be garden products and fruit and vegetables and things of that nature. And then he would haul this load over to the mining camps of Carbon County. It was a little more than a day's drive with team and wagon, but they could take this produce there and have it delivered in good shape. So this Sunday afternoon, Pete decided he'd better get everything ready and take to the peddler, because the peddler would leave early Monday morning. Well, he had a big dishpan full of butter, and he also had quite a number of eggs, and these he had put in a wash tub and covered them a little bit with grain so that they would be protected from breakage. We had no egg cartons, of course, at that time. Well, anyway, all this was put in the back, the box of a wagon, and about the only means of conveyance most people had. So they had everything ready, and they were to the peddlers, but of course they had had a good friendly drink or two in the process of getting ready. So on the way to the peddler, Pete, who was driving the horses, became a little bit unbalanced, even to the extent where he staggered backward and was eventually landed right in this tub full of eggs. And the butter was nearby, and he managed somehow to get quite a few dents in the pat of butter also. Well, when they reached the peddler's home, they extricated Pete from the eggs, and they were, of course, not in a marketable condition by then, and they could not even be salvaged to eat at home because they were mixed with the grain that they had been packed in. Well, they didn't want this trip to be entirely unprofitable, and his cronies had begged him for some time to let them cut his handlebar mustache, which he had worn with pride for many years. Oh, he had resisted this with his last breath. He would never sacrifice that beautiful mustache. But by then, Pete was in no condition to resist anything anymore. And so they took a pair of scissors, or perhaps even a pocket knife, whatever they had, and they managed to get one side of the mustache cut back when Pete finally came to enough to resist, or they had had all the fun they needed. But poor Pete had to sacrifice the other side of the mustache in order to grow a new one that matched. Pete also loved to dance, and when they would have the weekly dances, or whenever they convened in the community, Pete would show up about the middle of the dance when everything was going just fine, and he insisted on dancing with the most beautiful and popular girls of the town. Well, no one refused anyone a dance at that time. That was just, you were sure that everybody should have a good time at the dance. Well, of course, Pete's wife never came, but that didn't stop Pete from wanting to enjoy a good time. And so it was quite the thing for the girls to see how they could avoid Pete, but still take their turn so one girl didn't get stuck too much. And so he had a real good time at the dances. His English, as I have mentioned, of course, was something to be desired. And there was an event that he wanted to attend, but somehow he didn't get there. And in discussing it later, someone said, "Why, Pete, you could have gone with us." You know, he says, "No, ain't that awful? If I had a knowed I could have rode, I would have went." And so he didn't get to this wonderful event. Then there were other people whose accent was the main feature of their stories. And so this one is told, I think, of some Dane, but just which one hasn't gone with the story itself. But it doesn't matter. Any of them could have been guilty of this, because in those days, as well as this day, the older people were sort of scandalized by the way the younger people wanted to dance. And in this time, it was they were beginning other dances than the waltzes and the quadrilles, such as two-steps and barn dance and things of that kind. And, well, that was a novelty, and the older people didn't approve, to the extent for one of them even arose in church to condemn the young people. And he says, "Brothers and sisters, I think it is awful the way the young folks they dance nowadays. First they diddle on one foot, and then they diddle on the other, and then they go out in the hall, and what they do there, that is not for me to say." And another time, they were discussing cleaning the church. And so the presiding member got up to announce, he says, "There will be no Sunday next Sunday. For the simple reason this, we will rebusk the meeting house blue." So next Sunday there was no meeting.